thank you all for being here, for sharing this fellowship and camaraderie with a great educator. I think you're really going to have a wonderful engagement tonight with what education is all about and what our future can be. I want to begin by thanking you again. I'm going to not repeat everything that Susan said, but your caring for this institution makes a lot of difference. I serve as the Chief Academic Officer, which means that I hire faculty, I work on program development and grants and promotion and tenure and everything, all aspects of work. And I just have to say that not only the money that comes in, but the commitment to Teachers College from our alumni and from our friends makes a huge difference on the inside. It's resources, it's the strength of your convictions, it's also your expectations, for what this institution can be. So I want to thank you for that. It's really a privilege to introduce Lucy Calkins to you. She is our Richard Robinson Professor of Children's Literature. And just the background there, you probably all know this. Dick Robinson is the chairman and CEO of Scholastic, which has been built into one of the most magnificent corporations, firms. They're having an influence on and shaping and helping literacy in children's lives everywhere, really all over the world now. And Lucy is also the founder and the creator of the Reading and Writing Project, which is engaged in work in New York City, across the United States, and around the world. Professional development that I think is having a really huge impact on the work of teachers. To do that, she also has deep understanding of school reform, how schools work, the nature of school leadership. But perhaps most importantly, and this goes back to her very first book, and it's a strand that runs through all of her work, and you see this long string of more than a dozen books. It's the lessons we learn from a child. Lessons from a Child was the name of her first book. And it's being very deeply attuned to how children learn, what motivates them, how they understand, and then coming at that institutionally and professionally through teachers and through schools, so we really begin to leverage the deeper resources of children. So she is one of our great educators, I think a lead faculty member, but something more than that, a force for change in education. And I'm very proud to introduce her now to you.
Thank you, Tom. Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and especially so because of those people who are here. Vicky Cobb, who's a great nonfiction author, and Leslie Paoletti, who's the mother of one of the children that I taught about 35 years ago. And I saw Bev Falk was coming. I don't know if Bev is here. But Bev's and others, Joanne, who's a colleague of mine, and others. I've been asked to talk for just about a very short amount of time about the Common Core. And it's hard to do because it's a complicated topic and becoming more complicated all the time. I probably should just mention that Pathways to the Common Core is, which is my book on the Common Core, is in the, it's actually number 8 on the New York Times education books. So it's, and it is the best-selling book on the Common Core. So it's an influential book. Okay, so when I talk to people about the Common Core, one of the things I do, and I'm going to say this, to do this with you, is I often will talk about a mini lesson that I give to young kids. And I will say to young kids, when you read, you have a choice. You can read as a curmudgeon. And I say to them, do you know what a curmudgeon is? A curmudgeon, that's the guy whose house you do not go trick-or-treating at on Halloween, lest he come out with an angry snarl and a stick. You can read like a curmudgeon. And I take whatever book we're reading and I pick it up like it's the worst book in the world, and I get a snarl on my face, and I show them, and then I say, try it right now. Take the book you're reading, and before you even get started, just get that snarl on your face. Pick it up like, and will you just read it to each other like it's the worst book in the world? Well, before we go any farther, I think that the truth is that we can approach the Common Core as curmudgeons. And will you, before we go farther, just turn to the person beside you, and will you tell them what you like least about the Common Core? Sort of bitch and moan about the Common Core. Turn and talk. I want to just have a chance to do my own complaining. And I only have 20 minutes in all, or half an hour in all, so I'm going to keep it limited. But one of the things that I think that a lot of us feel is that the Common Core is prefaced on the idea that teachers are failing, that American teachers are failing. And, you know, the truth of the matter is the biggest problem right now, I think a lot of us believe, I certainly believe, that the biggest problem is the disparity between the rich and the poor, and the growing number of children who are growing up poor. And you know, what is it, 23% of American kids are growing up poor, and there is no other country that's doing better than us that has more than 10% of their kids growing up poor. If we had 10% of our kids growing up poor, we would be #1 in education. So there is a way in which, you know, a lot of us feel like, you know, let's deal with some of the problems that kids are bringing with them to school. Let's deal with joblessness, and let's deal with some of those issues. Then too, I think most educators feel that there's an issue around money, and you know, people will talk about what is it, $8 billion that's being spent on the Common Core, or I'm sure there's new numbers out there, but whatever. I don't have a problem with $8 billion spent on the Common Core. $8 billion on great literature into classrooms, $8 billion on teacher education, $8 billion on time for teachers to study students' work and to begin to really be, you know, responsive in their teaching, $8 billion for teachers to do more planning. But no, half of it's going towards testing and the other half to the technology on which the tests are going to be given. And so teachers are being required to amp up our teaching with really less and less time for teacher education, less and less time for planning, less and less time for studying student work. And that's hard. There are other problems, and I was just going to mention the third, which is that the Common Core explicitly says that it is not a curriculum, that it is saying how good is good enough, and that it is the job of the body politic to say how good is good enough, but that it is the job of school people to decide how to get there. And increasingly, the Common Core is kind of being associated with a collection of other documents that interpret the Common Core. And most of the people that I know, in fact, a lot of you know that Carmen Farina is a good friend of mine, the new chancellor. And when I talk to Carmen, my first piece of advice is, please, Carmen, protect the Common Core from all the documents surrounding it, that are people's interpretations of it. Because ultimately, right now, it is, I believe it's premature to say this is how a school district has to teach in order to get to the Common Core, because we don't know how to teach to get kids to those high levels. So to try to prescribe a particular, plus frankly the research on school reform suggests that if you have no ownership of how you get there, it's not going to work. That you know, not only prescribing the end result, but prescribing how you get there is probably not going to work. Now, having said that, the Common Core was just the whiff of an idea when my son graduated from Williams College, which is my alma mater. So I went to the graduation, and you know, you're sitting in this field, and Cory Booker, one of our trustees, was the graduation speaker, and he somehow knew I was there and spoke directly to me. And what Cory said in that talk, he told the story of going to, many of you have heard the story, of going to Newark, bounding into Newark to say, I've come from, you know, Yale Law School and I'm here to help. And Newark said to him, you know, how do you think you're going to help Newark? You know, if you want to help Newark, you got to take lessons from the Queen Mother. He's like, where's the Queen Mother? And they said, she's on the 7th floor of this low-income building. So Cory climbs up the 7 floors of this low-income building, knocks on her door, and this little wizened woman comes to the door, and he says, I'm Cory Booker, you know, and I'm here to help Newark, and they told me you could tutor me. She says, you want to help Newark? Follow me. And down they go, out into a busy intersection, and she says, as they get out to this intersection, she says, tell me what you see. He says, I see abandoned buildings filled with nefarious activities of all sorts. I see homelessness, I see joblessness, I see graffiti, I see despair. And she's like, boy, you're never going to help this city. And she spins around and marches off. And Cory catches up with her, and he says, ma'am, what just happened? What's the problem? And she says, let me tell you something. What you see on the inside, what you see on the outside is what's in you on the inside. And if you're the kind of person who only sees despair and depression, you're never going to help this city. If you want to help this city, you have to see hope and promise and opportunity. And I do believe that in education, we are also at an intersection, and that we ultimately have a choice. And we can look at the Common Core, and we can bitch and moan about it. But you know what? If you want to be part of shaping the future, I think we need to see hope and opportunity and promise in this document. So I am one of the people who sort of backs the Common Core wholeheartedly. I'm going to tell you a few of the things that I like about it, and then I want to just tell you what it means to me. So first of all, I like it because it's compare it to NCLB. The law of the land used to be to interpret literacy as phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and a little thing called comprehension. It was a very kind of decoding level of understanding of what literacy meant. And now we've got something that says, what we're aiming towards is high levels of literacy, is being able to read a text and to hear the axe that's grinding behind it, of being able to think about not only the text, but the craft with which it's written, and to think, why did the author use this particular craft technique? To be able to think across texts and notice the different perspectives in text. I mean, a totally different view of literacy and a far richer, higher view of literacy. So I love that. I love the message that you can't in a fifth grade, you can't get there unless you've got the fourth grade and the third grade and the second grade and the first grade, and unless you've got the social studies and the science. Like, it takes a village to bring up a child. And the truth of the matter is, there's far too many schools where teachers kind of close the door and do whatever they want, and therefore the kids' education is totally disjointed, particularly in literacy. All right, in math, they tend to this is their math approach, and so you can say in math, in fourth grade, everybody's going to learn. In third grade, everybody's going to learn long division. But in the teaching of writing, can you say in third grade what everybody's going to learn in a school? Not really. But the problem is then in fourth grade, no teacher can say, last year you learned. All right, because you have to sort of reinvent every single year. So the notion that it takes a coherent school that's thinking together about how to move kids along, I think is really important. Of course, the importance of nonfiction and of realizing you can't teach comprehension without teaching knowledge. That ultimately to comprehend is to have knowledge. And so literacy needs to be something that's across the curriculum and that embraces not just fiction, but nonfiction, not just narrative writing, but also information writing. So there's all of those things that I love, and I just have to sort of add another one, which is that in NCLB, writing was nowhere to be seen. The 5 things that mattered, writing was nowhere. And now writing and reading are given equal shrift. Reading is going to be assessed by writing, and 3 of the reading standards are really asking kids to be able to read like writers, paying attention to the craft moves that an author's written. And I do think in this world that ultimately, one of the things that matters tremendously is not just that you have knowledge, but that you can synthesize knowledge, you can organize knowledge, you can apply knowledge, you can do something with knowledge. And writing is one of the most powerful ways that people have to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to just give you sort of like my sense of what the Common Core says in reading and in writing in 10 minutes. To do that, we're going to do a little bit of work. Joanne, will you help me to pass these out? At Barbara Walters did the graduation speech at Yale. And in this speech, she talked about her memoir. And she said, in her memoir is called Audition. And to write the memoir, she interviewed various family members and found various family stories. And one of the family stories is that her grandmother, on her deathbed, or her great-grandmother on her deathbed, gathered her 5 sons and daughters around. And the great-grandmother said to the 5 sons and daughters, I have just one last thing to tell you. All my life I've been a virgin. And the 5 sons and daughters looked among themselves. And she said, I know what you're thinking, but I didn't participate. Now, to me, really to understand the Common Core, you need to participate. All right? You can look at the standards, you can point to the standards, but ultimately, a little bit of trying to use the standards goes a long way. So I want to point out that if you look at this first page that I gave you, and I gave this to you because it's so hard to see as I get older. I can't see any of these things when they're projected up there. Can't even see it here, but at least you're holding it, and you could look at it another day when you bring out the magnifying glass. And this page is the most important page in the reading standards. And by the way, so what I believe about the Common Core is read the standards. There's only 15 pages, 18 pages of the actual standards. Read them, okay? And this one page is the most important page in the reading standards. These are the anchor standards for all of reading, fiction and nonfiction, kindergarten through high school. only 10 standards, right? It's a kind of beautiful thing in its power and its simplicity. So standards 1, 2, and 3 are really talking about how you need to be able to read a text and see what the text says and what it suggests. You need to be able to pay attention to the detail and to the central ideas. So let's just do a little bit of reading before we go farther. Turn to the next page, and I'm going to read aloud a poem and just ask you to talk to the person beside you about whatever thoughts you have as I read this poem aloud. Let me keep going, and we'll come back to your questions in a minute. Mm-hmm. To a daughter leaving home. When I taught you at 8 to ride a bicycle, loping along beside you as you wobbled away on 2 round wheels, my own mouth rounding in surprise when you pulled ahead down the curved path of the park. I kept waiting for the thought of your crash as I sprinted to catch up, while you grew smaller, more breakable with distance, pumping for your life, screaming with laughter, the hair flapping behind you like a handkerchief, waving goodbye. So talk about the ideas that this brings up in you. All right, just turn and do that for a minute. Mm-hmm. You don't have many minutes, so get started quickly. Don't leave anyone out. People, look to the right, left. If you're leaving someone out, bring them in.
My boys grow up.
Or if you're talking about the empty nest syndrome, or what it is to parent yourself and to have your kids head off to college or their lives, you're not being Common Cory. Stop it. Okay, that is not allowed. Okay, the Common Core says you need to stay inside the 4 corners of the text. Okay, now actually the Common Core doesn't use those words. The publisher's guide to the Common Core used those words until somebody pointed out how sort of ridiculous they were, in which case the author of this guide, who keeps revising it constantly, revised it, but it still basically says it, even if it doesn't say it in those words, okay? You have to stay inside the 4 corners of the text, so no personal response. Okay, it's not allowed. Now, what I want to say about this is, remember this business about being a curmudgeon, okay? You can complain about that, and you're right that even, I think, I'm not a neurologist, but I think even your neurologist would say you can't read a single word without bringing your own experience to it. You know, just the word bike, and you're going to bring your own experience of bike. So it's not really possible to leave your whole life behind, okay? And certainly, let's say you're reading, you're a scientist and you're reading, you know, DNA, you wouldn't want to leave behind all that you know. Like, that's sort of prior knowledge, you know. In a way, it's what really thoughtful readers do, is to bring all you know to a subject. But on the other hand, let's get out of this complaining mode and realize that the Common Core is a reaction to the fact that too many teachers have taught texts where there is no text there's no book in the book talk. All right, where kids will read a text like this and have a long conversation where they leave the text behind totally and just talk about bike riding. What color is your bike? What color is my bike? You know, or where's your kid go to college? Oh, and does she like it? Okay, and how, do you have a child? What about do you go visit her? Do you visit her often? Are you a helicopter parent? Okay, and you've left the text behind totally. And the truth of the matter is, teaching literacy is helping kids to be accountable to the text and to be able to really look at what this text says and be able to talk about it. So we're going to reread it now. And I'm going to ask all of you to, this time, really pay attention to the mother. What kind of mother is this, and how do you know? And I want you to be able to talk about the mother using the words of the text. All right? And I want you guys to pay attention to the child. What kind of child is this? And how do you know? And I want you all to have the added challenge of, what's this text about anyhow? Right? What's the real message here? Okay? We're going to read it again, and remember this time you're going to use the words of the text to talk about the mother or the daughter. Pay close attention this time. Nothing goes by you, even the title. All right, what's this text really about? To a daughter leaving home. When I taught you at 8 to ride a bicycle, loping along beside you as you wobbled away on 2 round wheels, my own mouth rounding in surprise when you pulled ahead down the curved path of the park, I kept waiting for the thought of your crash as I sprinted to catch up, while you grew smaller, more breakable with distance, pumping, pumping, pumping for your life, screaming with laughter, the hair flapping behind you like a handkerchief, waving goodbye. Turn and talk. So, if we had more time, I would love to hear your thoughts, but let me just say a few, because we're going to move on to harder work in a minute. This is a mother who has low expectations, right? I kept waiting for the thud of your crash. You know, my own mouth rounding in surprise, right? As you take off, becoming smaller, more breakable, okay? But it is also a mother who gets off the sofa and throws herself physically into the job of helping her daughter leave home, right? She's right there, running beside the kid. Even though she's aware this is to a daughter leaving home. This is not just to a daughter learning to ride a bike, right? And this is the kind of daughter who at the age of 8 rides around the bend and does not look back. The bike wobbles and she's pumping, 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 right? Screaming with laughter, almost a kind of intensity there, right? She's not like her mother, right? This mother has brought up a daughter who's fearless and young so far. She'll be like her mother in another. Yeah. So now, moving on to standards 4, 5, and 6. They get harder, okay? We're going to reread it. But this time, you're going to be paying attention to the language, to the actual words that are used, to the symbols, to the choice of why this word, not that word. Why loping, okay? You're going to be paying attention to the structure. What's up with the punctuation? What's up with the stanzas? And you're asking, what does the language have to do with what the text is really about? What does the structure have to do with what the text is really about? And to the perspective, okay? So let's say you guys are going to do structure and perspective, and you guys are going to do language, right? Metaphor, word choice, symbolism. And what does it have to do with what the text is really about? To a daughter leaving home. When I taught you at 8 to ride a bicycle, loping along beside you as you wobbled away on 2 round wheels, my own mouth rounding in surprise, when you pulled ahead down the curved path of the park, I kept waiting for the thud of your crash as I sprinted to catch up, while you grew smaller, more breakable with distance, pumping, pumping, pumping for your life, screaming with laughter, the hair flapping behind you like a handkerchief, waving goodbye. Now remember, cite the text as you're talking. Point to it. Talk about it. Actual words. Go. People, let's hear some thoughts. So let's hear from the great author, Vicky. Okay, so Vicky's an author of children's nonfiction. Just one observation, Vicky. I know you could have a million. Wait, here.
One thing I notice is the use of the imagery of roundness. There's the round wheels, and she was redundant there when she wrote that, and the mouth echoing that in surprise, and then she went down a curved path. And so what this is telling me is that this is a circular path that the kid is moving away on.
Okay, maybe it's how does it connect to the meaning of the text? Do you think it's that it's a circular path? Like she's going to, all the seasons, they come round and round. Now, can I just say that right now we could take this and we could end up with a debate. Like we could say, is this because the text is really about the cycles of life, and that these are the cycles of life? Is this about the child's going to come around again, and we could end up, let's read it again. Right now I'm going to ask partner A to take this position. I'm going to ask partner B to take this position. And I want you to read the text and gather evidence for your position and get ready to be able to say, I take the position that for these reasons, okay? And get ready to debate it, which would be very common, Cory. We'll come back to that later. But all right, so one of the things is the O's, the circles, all right, some of the word choices. Did you notice the word choice? Loping along beside her. Wolves lope. There's a way in which you're bred to lope. You're going to be loping forever. You can keep up. But then she's no longer loping, she's sprinting to catch up. It's breathless, it's not going to last, it's not going to work, okay? What about that image at the end, to the handkerchief, waving goodbye, right? I got the feeling of those old, movies where the train is taking off, and the off to war, and the person's being left behind, all right? Structure. What did you notice about structure? Joanne's a professor here.
We talked about the fact that there are no long sentences here. We're reading straight down the page because each line is very short. So that propels us forward. The text propels us forward because it's so... Well, we didn't get that far, but I presume that we would say something like the fact that there is this moving apart, and one person is moving ahead faster and faster as the text moves on.
There is a feeling of there is no stopping it, right? There's a kind of breathlessness to it. You can't stop it, you can't control it, and this daughter basically rides her bike right off the page, right? And we're left with the mother, okay? In any case, I'm not going to spend longer on this because what I'm trying to do is just give you a flavor for Common Core work. And I want you to understand that it's good work. It's interesting, heady work that intellectuals can do together to engage with the text, okay? And this is the work of Common Core reading. I mean, it's not the only work, and by the way, it's the same in nonfiction as fiction, the exact same work, all right? It's the same standards in nonfiction. I mean, it's obviously going to play out a little differently. Now, I can't talk to you and not mention something about writing, so I want you to just turn your page a little bit more. And what I'm going to say to you is that in the teaching of writing, the Common Core places particular emphasis on three kinds of writing. So argument, information, and narrative writing. And these kinds of writing are supposed to be equally divided between the day, which really means quite a lot of narrative writing, actually. Because, a lot of kids are doing a lot of information writing, like write about a book, write about a textbook, write and answer questions, but they're supposed to do 1/3 narrative, 1/3 information, and then 1/3 amount of the writing is opinion or argument, okay? And they call it opinion in the younger grades and argument in the older grades. So opinion, sort of like persuasive writing, and argument is more like the, sort of logical debate, pro and con something with a counter argument in it, all right? You can't have argument without having a counter argument. So I just want to sort of walk you up the level of argument writing. So we're going to just look at argument writing across a few years so you get a sense. And this is one of the things that's really important, is for teachers to have a feeling of how much is okay. Like, what are we asking kids to do, so that there can be some sense of, what's good enough. So here we go with argument writing and all of these are on-demand writing, as in writing that kids do in 20 minutes, half an hour, without teacher input. So we start with kindergarten. Do not throw your coat, hang your backpack, you will make a big mess, and you will not find anything. Moving on to first grade. 5 Bows, great book. Has your mom made you wear something you hate? The puppy in this book has to wear a bow. She hates it. She tries to take it off, but I'm not telling. Read this book and you will find out. If you need a tip where to find it, come back to Mrs. Haley's room. It's a double green dot basket. Double green dot means H book, H level book. So be an H reader, or I'll read it to you and we will laugh. Moving on to 3rd grade. And I'm wanting you to get a sense of a progression here, okay? America is facing a big problem. Sodas are making people become overweight. This is very unhealthy, and we need to stop. One reason Mayor Bloomberg has banned sodas larger than 16 ounces is because popular menus are much bigger now than it was back then. For example, in 1955, the size of sodas at restaurants was 7 ounces, and now you can buy a soda that's more than 30 ounces, and that is very unhealthy. Another reason is experts say that too many sodas can lead to obesity, and obesity? You don't want to get obesity, because obesity is heart trouble and diabetes, so be careful. No more supersized drinks. Please be careful. Don't be mad. This is the right choice. Say bye-bye to supersized drinks. Moving on up to 4th grade. Math is the worst subject in school. It's the worst subject in school for many reasons. The first reason is that if you have a calculator, you won't need to know it. The second reason is it takes too much time out of the day. And last but not least, you won't really need to use math anywhere. Before I said if you have a calculator, you won't need to know math, and it's true. If you're having a party and you need 32, and you need 2 chocolate bars for everyone, and there's 32 people, just type in 32 times 2, and you got your answer. My second reason why math is the worst subject in school is it takes too long in class. In my class, math is a period and a half, and in my opinion, that is too long. We should be using that time to read or write or do something more important. Last but not least, we don't really need to use it anywhere, which is true. If you go to the store and you buy something for $5.21 and you give them a $10 bill, you'll see on that little monitor that they're subtracting $5.21 from $10. But if you have some doubts, that's where you use your calculator. If you still don't believe me that math is the worst subject in school, then try it for yourself and see what a waste it is. Now, the last piece is not on demand. This is a piece that kids did some reading in order to do. It took them a little bit longer, but it is a flash draft that a kid wrote on his own. And I'm just going to read you parts of it because it's long. Schools should keep serving chocolate milk for young children. There should be chocolate milk because kids like it, it gives them vitamins, and it gets kids in good habits. I do like chocolate milk, but that's not why schools should serve it. Research shows that chocolate milk is good for kids. Moving to the second paragraph here, I'll show you how chocolate milk turns out to have vitamins. A famous nutritionist shows that chocolate milk is a good source of vitamin A, D, E, and calcium. That's a lot of vitamins. And if they're in something you actually like to drink. This nutritionist has 2 kids, and she lets them drink chocolate milk, and those kids look pretty healthy. One girl has really white teeth and shiny hair. This nutritionist works for the Dairy Association, so she must have studied how good milk is for you. There's more reasons why chocolate milk should be served in schools. The famous nutritionist showed that chocolate milk has a lot less sugar and carbohydrates than soda and power drinks like Gatorade. So if kids get in the habit of drinking milk in school, then they'll probably skip the sodas outside the school. This famous nutritionist didn't actually say this as a fact. This is my interpretation, but it was the facts her kids pointed out about how soda has made sugar that made me think of it. That's why we should keep serving chocolate milk at our middle school. It gets kids to drink milk, it gives us vitamins, and it builds good habits. Now, that's all clear. And as an aside, last year, my 5th grade studied chocolate milk, and we ended up having no chocolate milk in the cafeteria in June, and it was a bummer. I just stopped drinking, period, until we were allowed to go out to lunch in the middle of 5th grade, and then we started to go out for pizza and Coke. And one reason is because there was no chocolate milk. What about that, Jamie Oliver? Jamie Oliver is a famous English chef who, for some reason, also makes lunch for kids in Los Angeles. He showed that a bus full of sugar sort of compares to how much sugar we get from chocolate milk in school, but if you start making those comparisons, we wouldn't be able to eat anything from school lunches. In fact, vitamins from chocolate milk are probably the only ones we get in school lunch, so keep chocolate milk our main source of vitamins, good health, and happiness. So I'm just wanting you to get a little bit of a feeling of argument writing. And one of the things to pay attention to is when you were in 5th and 6th grade, you probably did like ye old state report, where you studied, Switzerland, and you did the main products and the state bird and the, whatever it is. Research now is meant to be that kids take a provocative topic and they read a variety of points of view about it. And they come to read these texts looking for bias, looking for perspective, looking for the different, points of view that different authors have. And when they're writing, they're trying to kind of make sense of conflicting points of view on an interesting topic. So the emphasis on argument is leading to a sort of different interpretation of what it means to do research. So that's a quick, a very quick sense of some of what the Common Core's saying. And I think probably to talk about what it's doing in schools and what it means, we should engage in a conversation. Instead of me sort of sitting up here talking at you, I have a lot to say and think about it. And I'm sure you do as well. And I think that is the question. My colleague Michael Fullen thinks that the Common Core is going to be the great ship Titanic that's going to go down because of a fatal flaw, which will be implementation. And I think a lot of you heard that the UFT just sent word in New York State that they're pulling out their support of the Common Core because of the way it's been implemented in New York State. And in New York State, it's not just been the implementation of the Common Core, it's also the fact, and this is actually not just in New York State, but it's across the country, that the whole teacher effectiveness work is coming at the same time. So schools are not just being required to, teach to the Common Core because the test was last year, and a third of the kids only a third of third graders are passing, but also at the same time that the Common Core is coming out, there's a tremendous emphasis on teacher evaluation. And, every principal that I know has 480 or 520 observations to be doing a year of teachers with low inference notes that are coded in 22 categories, So the principals have 500 observations to be doing of teachers, You have to give the same number of observations to the, every single teacher in the school, the very experienced and the new, the art teacher and the literacy teacher, the math teacher. So this is like a perfect storm in the public schools right now. And I'd love to talk to you about your thoughts about it, but why don't I pass the mic to Tom and you could take questions. Once they were adopted, and everybody, the states had signed off on then a couple people came out to say, actually, I was the author. Okay, but that kind of came out after they were adopted. And the people who say they were the author was Dave Coleman, and Sue Pimental, and Jim Patterson. And Dave Coleman is a expert in branding, and he's now president of the College Board. And Sue Patterson is an attorney, and Sue Pimental is an attorney, and Jim Patterson, I think his name is, works for ACT. And he's actually been very quiet. Nobody's heard a peep that I know of has heard a peep from him.
In a school where I tutor in the 5th grade public school, the chocolate milk argument was being used and worked on. Is that an example of implementation?
What school are you in? What school are you tutoring in? Okay. So the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project, which is the organization that I lead, works directly with several hundred New York City schools, but a lot of other schools kind of piggyback off of those schools. So 198 is not a school that we work directly with, but they're piggybacking off of the schools that we do. And we have a unit of study teaching kids to research chocolate milk in the 5th grade. And it actually is just a week or so of thinking about chocolate milk, and then they move on to topics of their own choosing. But in order to get, in order to get biased texts that represent different points of view, takes a little research, and the teachers don't have enough time to do that. So, that Dairy Association video, for example, where they're all for chocolate milk, and the kids look very healthy with their white teeth and so forth. A lot of the kids are learning to be able to think, who made that, and what's the axe that's grinding behind it? So, I just want to say, it's so fabulous that you're volunteering in a school. And anybody else who wants to, we are dying to get more people working in schools, and thank you so much for doing that. Yes? Yeah. Well. Yeah, 5th grade is a very important grade because it's they're on the cusp of all of that, and we need to make sure that they have the skills to really be independent, because in middle school, we see a tremendous dip in the level of work. 5th graders are doing such higher level work than 6th graders. So it's a great thing that Carmen Farina is going to be placing a spotlight on middle schools, because she's right that the gap between what's happening in 5th grade and 6th grade is gigantic. And 6th grades are very hard places for kids. Middle schools are hard places for kids. So, but thank you for doing that.
Could you comment on the hijacking of the corporations on the Common Core? Because just as you read the Common Core, as I read them, it seemed an opportunity for kids to read and hear many voices on many subjects. And yet, it's where we have this factory mentality that, like the textbook is the Bible, this is the only book you have to read, and that nonfiction, children's literature that's nonfiction is fungible. It doesn't matter who the writer is. Could you comment on that?
Well, so there's things that concern me, and one of them that you're bringing up, Vicki. 2 years ago, and I'm not sure I have the exact dates, but something like 2 years ago, New York State put out an RFP for a curriculum to be developed, statewide curriculum, aligned to the Common Core. And because I care so much about the teaching of writing and critical literacy and higher level comprehension, I don't generally make curriculum that I just give to a state, but I was willing to think about that. But then I read the RFP, and it said that the curriculum had to do two things. It had to be aligned to a particular lesson plan that some of you know of, which is a lesson plan on the Gettysburg Address, a very famous lesson that's been written on the Gettysburg Address, and that's been cited as a model for Common Core instruction. and it couldn't use copyrighted sources. So an ELA curriculum that doesn't use copyrighted sources means that it's all sort of online, written by no one or whatever texts, okay? The lesson on the Gettysburg Address is worth researching if you're very interested in the Common Core. It is by the author of the Common Core, Dave Coleman, and he goes around giving it even and talking about how great it is. But to me, it basically represents horrible teaching. That is, all students are supposed to read the Gettysburg Address, and there's literally rules that you may not tell them any background knowledge. Right? You can't tell them anything about the context of it because you're supposed to only read inside the four corners of the text. And it tells them the good questions and the bad questions. And a good question would be, why is the word dedicated used, how is the word dedicated used differently in sentence 3 than in sentence 2? Okay? And a bad question would be, what are they fighting for anyhow? Or have you ever been to a funeral? Or why does it matter that all men are created equal? Those would be bad questions, all right? And the point was that it takes them away from the text, okay? I do understand the point, but the way the lesson goes basically is the whole class inches through this text for 6 days, repeatedly, with little questions being asked, and there is no small group, there is no choice, there is no assessment-based instruction, there is no effort to be relevant, there is no effort to tap students' interest, there is no real reading, because they just read this one text repeatedly for 5 or 6 days. So to me, it kind of represents, it is in a way Common Core aligned, I can see it, but it's not the way I would have done the Common Core. All right, to me, to do the Common Core, I would have gotten kids reading huge volume, you know, talking deeply in book clubs, you know, writing a lot, reading a lot, generating questions themselves, not just answering the teacher's questions, etc. So part of my problem with this is not that as a lesson, because I think, you know what? Different people have a right to have different views, and that is a totally fine view for somebody to have. But to mandate it as the curriculum for New York State when it's totally untested, like, until you have a whole city teaching that way and we get unbelievable results, I don't think you create a curriculum based on it, okay? And I think right now the Common Core needs people experimenting with different ways to do this, and we need to understand we don't know how. Like, I work with a lot of smart educators in the school system, and we're all trying very hard, but we don't know how to get all kids to these very high levels, okay? And I don't think now is the time to close down on somebody has figured out the way and they're going to mandate it for the state. All right, so in New York State, now New York State is a hardcore Common Core state, right? We joke about that around the country. And most states are not as strongly focused on, you know, a particular interpretation of the Common Core. But New York State has been very focused on that, which is an emphasis on short texts that you reread multiple times, all kids reading. If you're in 5th grade and you read at the 2nd grade level, you're still supposed to hold a text that's at the 5th grade level and keep reading it over and over. And a lot of text-based questions, you know, which means that the answer is in the text. So it's not, you know, whatever. So that's New York State, and that's, you know, and I think when the UFT said they're against the way in which New York State has rolled out the Common Core, it's both that emphasis, but it's also a couple other things. One is that the test, you know, the test that came out was unlike any test we've ever seen. So just to give you an example of this, the test, all right? So you picture you picture a high-stakes test, a reading test. Most of you would read a passage, like on the SAT, if you watch your kid, you know, help your kid with the SAT. You read a passage, and then you answer the questions. And you as an adult read the passage, and you answer the questions, right? Really smart principals. So Liz Phillips, who's, you know, used to work for a publisher, is a principal of one of New York City's finest schools, was one of the state's top 20 schools. Liz told me when she read the test, because I didn't read it, there was not a single question on it that she could answer without looking back. Okay? Like, it'll all be paragraph 9 of passage 4 uses the structure, uses which structure for which reason. Okay? Or the use of dedicate in paragraph 16 of such and such means what? It's all look back. Well, even for 3rd graders, that whole business of constantly looking back, but it's not how most people read. Like most people read nonfiction, you read it, you learn, and then you have something, comprehension in you, and then you could answer a lot of the questions, okay? But she literally said there wasn't a single question that she could answer without looking back. So it's a very unusual test. It's not a test like anything we've ever seen before. So New York wasn't ready for that test, right? And then there's a question of whether we should be ready for that test. You know, is that how we want to teach reading? Like is reading, I mean, a lot of the questions were the ones I would expect on an AP English test, like the use of the image in paragraph 4 was to A, build tension, B, develop the character, C, raise the stakes, or D. So it's very sort of craft, you know, instead of, you know, what troubles did the Donner family encounter going west? Or which tool would have helped the Donner family the most on their trip west? It would be the image of the swirling snow is to A, build tension, B, a very odd test.
Yes?
So my question has to do with implementation. I mean, you talked about that before being a headache. I guess, what recommendation would you have for smaller districts, particularly smaller urban districts, who are now adopting the Common Core, but are really struggling with implementing it in a way that doesn't cause so much anxiety or frustration to the knowledge base of teachers who have to translate that into their teaching in the classroom?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I would say is that adopting the Common Core is about learning, I think it's about learning a system of continuous improvement in a school. And that is, it is about becoming a professional learning community where you take really seriously doing high-level work and using student data to help you do that. And by data, I don't just mean test scores. I mean, you know, whatever you value, using the data on that. Okay, so if you value the volume of reading kids are doing, using data on that. So I think that the big challenge is, like Warren Buffett says, what's my secret as an investor? It's that I say no. He says, every day I sit there and I look at investment proposals and I say, no, 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 and then one comes along that's exactly right, and I say yes, and one yes can take you very far. So what I would say is the worst thing you can do is to try to implement 15 things in very poor, fast, thrown together ways where nobody really is learning from each other, and nobody's doing really high quality work, and there's no accountability for results or for affecting student achievement, because it's just too much coming at you. I would really be careful about, like, I would say, what are my priorities? Now, the second thing I would say is I would not pay attention to the shifts. Okay? So the shifts are that some people have said there's 5 or 6 shifts that are the most important shifts to be made. So, for example, one of the shifts is a shift from fiction to nonfiction reading. Okay? I disagree. That is, each school needs to assess where they are and to decide what shift they need to make. Now, most American schools have been teaching reading in the elementary schools through a basal, where basically kids just read a paragraph and then they answer question, more questions than there are sentences, okay? They need to make a shift from no reading to a volume of reading so that kids move up the level of text complexity, because being able to read harder text is a big deal. But the way to get kids to read harder text is to read a lot, okay? At the upper edge of what they can read. So I think your school has to decide, you know, what are going to be our priorities, and that has to do with what can you already do and what's next for you. So if your kids are reading, you know, 80, 90 fiction books a year, a shift to nonfiction is one of the best things you could do, okay? Or a shift to writing is one of the best things you could do. But if your kids aren't yet reading fiction, and by the way, you have no nonfiction in the school anyhow, you know, I would not shift from fiction to nonfiction, okay? I think you have to take this, you have to say this is a personal decision. And I would say to you, don't do anything because of the Common Core. Do what you would do anyhow, because of like what kids need. And use the Common Core to allow you to do it in a whole school way. And I do think do it in a whole school way. All right, we're all gonna do this, and we're gonna be in each other's faces, we're gonna be in each other's rooms, we're gonna be public about it and transparent and visible. We're gonna use performance assessments to actually look at progress. Because it, in a way, doesn't matter what you do. It's that your school becomes that learning community that's on about getting better, and it learns how to learn. and that's what you want to do. And the Common Core can help that tremendously. It can be the wind behind your sails. Use the Common Core, as the excuse to say to people, same old is not okay. Does that help? Tom's telling me we have to end.
No, I'd like to make two comments. First is to remind you that we have a reception afterwards, a wonderful reception awaiting us, which is going to be in Everett Lounge, and we have people to direct us along the way. So with that in mind, let's take one more question, and that'll be it.
So, why does Teachers College in 125 years not found the panacea? I don't think it's ever gonna. I don't think there's going to be one. No, what I mean by that is that everybody looks for the magic bullet, the panacea, that if you do this, it all will be well. And the truth of the matter is, it's how people will say to me, if you adopt the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project's methods, will scores skyrocket or whatever? My answer is, it depends. This work is complicated, and ultimately it's how you do it, and it's got to do with people's belief systems. It's got to do with the actual human beings involved. It's got to do with the support that the people are given. So but basically I believe that looking for the right answer, I think it's right for the nation to say it's okay for the body politic to say how good is good enough. That there are shared standards that we can all be aiming towards. I don't ultimately think that there can be a national curriculum because there's no one way to get there. There are different approaches that can lead people to high levels of reading and writing, or high levels of math. I don't know anything about math, but I'm sure there's different approaches to lead you to math. So
Teachers College, Columbia, why aren't they standing up and saying exactly this?
we are.
She is.
I just had a coaching institute with 400 people from around the country who are principals or coaches, and we were just in New York City schools for the last 3 days studying, the practices that are going there. And there's no better, I don't think there's better Common Core teaching anywhere than in New York City. I mean, we've got some fantastic classrooms. And let me just say that if you want to see some videos, our website, the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project, has about 40 videos that are videos of really great New York City instruction. And, it's helpful to see, not perfection, but to see really rigorous instruction, and you come to understand that you watch these classes and you say, you know what, I would like to be a kid in those classes. And that's kind of when this makes some sense. So I guess the last thing I just want to say is, if I was to say, to go back to the question about implementation, I want to harken back to Roland Barthes, who's led the Principal Center at Harvard. And Roland Barthes said that the key in a school is the relationships among the people who teach there. And that ultimately, too often the relationships among teachers are like the relationships among 2-year-olds in a sandbox, where one has a pail, the other has a shovel. They talk all the time, but never to each other. They never share toys. They never engage in doing something together. And ultimately, what's going to get us there is to have schools become vibrant places where teachers are studying together. And learning from visiting each other's classrooms, from planning together, from studying student work together. I mean, if there's a panacea, that is the panacea. So there is no time for that. And the first thing when Carmen became chancellor, in my letter to her is save the Common Core from all the papers around it, number one. And number two is bring back time for professional study. In Singapore, there's 100 hours of professional study. We can't. The quality of teaching is everything, and the quality of teaching has to do with the quality of education the teachers receive. So, thanks very much.
Thank you.